friends, it's Christy. Welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be making a card using Hello Bluebird's Be Happy stamp set, and I will be coloring to match a paper frame that I have saved from a previous project. That is from the Cartabella Here, There, and Everywhere 6x6. And that was all in my previous Plan a Card With Me video. So if you missed that one, you might want to go back and watch that first, because that's how we figured out how this whole card was going to come together. But anyway, for today, I have stamped those images out on Spectrum Noir Ultra Smooth Premium White cardstock with Lawn Fawn Jet Black ink, and I will be coloring with my Copic markers. I'm starting with my bees, and for the yellow parts of them, I'm going to use Y11, Y13, and Y15. I'm trying to match the yellow that is in that pattern paper, which is just a bit muted. So that's why I went with these kind of mid to light shades. I started with the Y15 for the shadows. Then I'm blending out with the Y13, and then I'll use the Y11 for a highlight. I'm going to place that highlight on the lower part of their face and then the center of the bands around their body where it's the most rounded and would catch the most light. And then I'm going to darken up this combo slightly to do the honey in the little jar. So I'm using Y13, Y15, and Y17 for that. And putting the Y17 down at the bottom right and then blending toward the top left as I go lighter. Then I'm going to switch to the neutral grays for the black parts of my bees. I'm using N3, N5, and N7. I didn't want to go too black, so that's why I decided to only go up to the N7, but if you want your bees to be darker, you could add in the N9 and take away the N3. So I'm using that N7 as my darkest shadows. I'm going to place those on the sides of the head and the top and bottom of the little bands around their body. I'm also going to color in their legs with the N7 and the little balls on the tips of their antenna. And then I'll come in with my mid-tone, that N5, and start to blend that out. Just making sure to go over the edge of that N7 and pull it into the mid-tone so I don't leave behind any harsh lines. Especially those darker colors can leave behind harsh lines, so you just want to make sure that you're blending over the edge of the previous shade. And I will repeat that process now with the N3 to fill everything in, just making sure I go over the very edge of that N5 and pull that mid-tone into the highlight. And I think this dark gray really matches well the centers of those flowers, so that is also represented in that color palette. For their wings, I am going to stray outside of that color palette slightly, but I think the wings look so great in this combo. I'm using BG70 and BG10. The BG10 first because it's a little bit brighter, and then the BG70 is like a barely there shade, so I'm blending that out into the white cardstock and also using that to shade the glass jar with the honey inside. And then I'm going to give these bees some rosy cheeks with R11 and R20. I put the R20 down first, blended out the edges with the R11 to soften that up. And then I wanted it to be just a bit darker since these colors do dry back a bit, so I added in a touch more of that R20. Next, I'm going to work on the strawberries, and that kind of reddish corally pink in that pattern paper is not a vibrant red, so I tried to match that as best as I could, and I went with R20, R22, and R24 for that. And I think it did end up being a pretty good match. So I'm going to start with the R24 up at the top of the berry, right where that little cap is. That cap would cast a little bit of a shadow. And then I'm blending down with the R22. I am trying to carefully color around the little seeds, but I will go back over those later with a gel pen to clean them up. So if you do get some ink in there, it's not the end of the world, but I just tried to go around them since they are a bit larger. It was fairly easy to do. So R24 at the top, and then R22 is going to be the mid-tone, and R20 down toward the bottom, where maybe it's not quite as ripe because it's facing toward the earth. And I just did one at a time because it is a bit of a larger image, and because I was working my way around those seeds and just wanted to take my time and be more careful. So once I have those strawberries done, I'm going to work on the greenery on that strawberry plant. I decided to go with G40, G43, and G46. Again, trying to match the greens in that pattern paper. They are a bit more of a muted green. They're a darker green, but kind of a muted shade. They're not super vibrant or super like yellow green or fresh. They're a bit more muted and desaturated, so that's why I went with these shades. And I started with the G46, and then I'm going to blend that out with the G43, also coloring in the stems of the strawberry plants, which are super thin. So I just use the very tip of my marker and try to color almost straight up and down, kind of shift the way I'm holding my marker when I try to get into those super narrow little areas. Also for the leaves, I'm placing the darkest color at the base of the leaf toward the stem and then blending with the lightest out on the tips. I just like to do it that way, but I mean, you could reverse it if you wanted to. Also for the larger leaves at the bottom, I'm placing the darkest shade, the G46, in the center where all of those lines are drawn. That's going to help those leaves look a little bit more folded up and concave. And then blending out with the G43 once again. And then I'll use the G40 for the highlight on the edges of each of those leaves. I'm so happy to be coloring strawberries once again. You guys know how much I love strawberries, and I cannot resist a good strawberry card, especially if it's got bees. I just think there's something so sweet about bees and strawberries together. So I'm going to finish up this last leaf, and then I'm going to go back and do my little strawberry blossom. I should have done this earlier when I had the shades out, but I just forgot. So I'm going to use the Y15 and the Y17 for the center of that strawberry blossom, and then I'll go back to my BG70 and BG10 to add just a touch of shading to the outer edge of the petals, and then I'll leave the center around the yellow part just white, plain cardstock. Next, I'm going to pull out that kind of soft indigo flower in that pattern paper, almost like a darker periwinkle. And so I'm going to use some blue-violet tones for that. I'll use BV01, BV02, and BV04. Starting with the BV04 and outlining the edge of the little ruffly petals, and just giving those a bit of definition, and then I'll blend that out with the BV02. So I'm going to leave some areas of white so that I can fill that in with my highlight shade, but I'm just kind of carefully going around and filling in all of those little ruffly petals, and then I'll just use that BV01 to fill in any remaining white space. And then for the smaller flower, I decided to pull out that soft pink again that I use for the bee's cheeks, but I darkened it up with the R22. So it's R11, R20, and R22. And yes, I did accidentally stamp that little flower upside down. I didn't realize it until after it was done, and I just figured, well, there's no need to restamp it. It's going to work just fine. So I just have to color upside down, which is no big deal at all. Kind of made me laugh. I don't think I've ever done that before in my card making career, but there is a first time for everything. Even after more than a dozen years of doing this, there's still new things that happen. So anyway, for the greenery, for those flowers, I switched it up just slightly, still sticking to those desaturated tones. But there are two different tones of leaves in that pattern paper, so I wanted to try to represent the other one. And so I used YG61, YG63, and YG67. And I'm coloring these leaves the same way I did the others with regards to the shading. So the darkest is going to be closest to the stem, and then the highlight will be at the tips of those leaves where they would be kind of stretched up toward the light. So I'll just fill in those last remaining leaves, and then I will also color in the green part at the bottom of that little flower, which is now on top because it's upside down. But then I'll take a white gel pen and I'm going to go over the seeds of my strawberries to make those bright white again. So yeah, you could color straight over the seeds and it's not a big deal. As long as you've got a white gel pen, you can fix it pretty easily. And it does cover it up quite nicely as long as it's not like too dark. And then I'll take a black Jelly Roll pen and I'm just going to go over the eyes of my bee that has his eyes open to make those bright and shiny again. And then I will trim these images out with their matching dies. For my background, I'm going to take a piece of Bristol smooth surface cardstock and I'm going to do a simple watercolor background using my Distress Oxides. I'm going to use Salvage Patina and Shaded Lilac. So the Salvage Patina, again, is not in the pattern paper, but I wanted to have a little bit of blue for my sky, and I did add it into the color palette by using the teal shades on the bee's wings and on the honey jar. So I'm kind of mixing these two shades together and doing little spots of each one in kind of like an organic, smoothed out way. I just wanted to have little blobs of both the aqua and the purple tones here and there just to create a bit more interest. So I'm making sure to leave a bit of extra ink here and there and, you know, to wash it out with a bit of extra water also in places so I get some dark areas and some light areas just to give it a bit more interest. And then once I'm happy with how that's looking, I'm going to let it dry completely. And then once it has, I'm going to come back in and just do a bit of splatter detail. So I pressed a bit more ink onto that acrylic block again, and then I'll just pick that up with a bit of water and tap it against my finger until I get a nice fine spray of dots. And then I'll just clean my brush to do the purple as well. And this does dry back a bit, so it won't be quite as prominent as it is now, but I like that look when it softens up a bit. So I'll just set this aside to dry. And while it is, I'm going to work on my sentiment. So I'm taking the word congrats from the Hello Bluebird Gallery Frame 6. And I die cut that 5 times out of some Lawn Fawn Sugar Plum cardstock. It does die cut the word into 2 pieces. So you get the CONGR in one part and then the ATS in the other. So just being careful to pop out both pieces and not bend them out of shape because I want to stack these to create a nice thick sentiment. So I want to make sure that they kind of hold their shape as they are meant to from the die cut. So once I have those all popped out, I'm just going to start lining them up and adding a bit of glue. I'm using my Barely Art Precision Craft Glue because it has that super fine nozzle, so I can just add the tiniest bit that I need to adhere these letters together. So once I have a layer of that glue down, I'll grab a second little die cut and stack that on top, kind of press it together along the sides to make sure that it is lined up perfectly, and then I will continue adding glue and stacking another layer on top. And I will continue that until I have 5 layers for each of those. You could also do 4 or 6 or whatever you want. I just wanted to have like a nice thickness to make a bold sentiment. So that's what I did for this one. And I really like how that darker purple is going to pull in the little purple flowers from that pattern paper. I happen to love purple. Indigo is one of my favorite colors when it's got a little bit of blue mixed in with the purple. And so I just was really drawn to using the purple for the sentiment. But if purple's not your thing, you could also use one of the other shades in that pattern paper. There's definitely options with the pink and the soft red or even the yellow. So this die cut is actually only part of my sentiment. So once I finish up this last piece, I will set this aside for now and work on the rest of my sentiment. So I've popped that background into my MISTI now that it has completely dried, and I'm going to stamp the Happy B-Day phrase from this stamp set. I'm using VersaFine Onyx Black ink, and I did stamp that down twice to make sure it was nice and bold and legible, especially since it is such a small, delicate sentiment. And then I'm going to pop my card base in my MISTI. It is MFT Grapesicle cardstock, and I'm stamping in Lawn Fawn Juice Box ink. And I just chose another bee and one of the other sentiments that says, "You're the bee's knees." And then I am ready to start assembling. So the frame that was left over was from the Hello Bluebird Gallery Frame 2. And I have added some foam tape to the back of that so that it could be popped up and well supported. So I'm just going to peel off those release papers, and then I will line that up right over the background so that the Happy B-Day is in that top left corner of the bottom section. Just pop that into place. And then I'll add a bit of liquid glue to the back of the whole frame piece. And so I can adhere that to the front of my card base. It's an A2 standard size card, so 4 1/4 wide by 5 1/2 tall. And then I can bring in my images. Before I add them though, I wanted to add the rest of that sentiment down at the bottom. So I'm just lining it up and making sure I have it exactly where I want it so that the front of the C is spaced just as far from the edge of the pattern paper as the end of the S is on the right hand side. So I'm just going to pick that up one at a time and pop that down into place so I can make sure that it is lined up straight. And I like how that kind of takes up the rest of the room down in that bottom section nicely. So again, just making sure I have that on there straight, and then I can pop that down, make any adjustments as needed, and then that will dry very quickly. So I have added some foam tape to the backs of my images as well. So I'm going to start popping these up. I knew that the strawberry was going to go down at the bottom right corner of the top section, so I went ahead and popped that up. And then I have the large purple flower that's going to go over on the left-hand side. I've got the bee that I need to cover up that little hole in the pattern paper that we talked about in the Plan a Card With Me video. So his wing is going to perfectly cover that up, and now nobody else will ever know that it was even there. And I'm going to tuck the little honey jar into his hands. Then I'll add the smaller pink flower down in the middle between the strawberries and the purple flower. And then I want to arrange those 2 extra leaves so that it covers up the fact that there's no stem there. There is also a stem in that stamp set, so I could have stamped the stem and cut it out, but I just figured if I can cover it up with the leaves, why bother? So that was just like a lazy way out of it, but I think it ended up looking right. And so then I just have that last little bee, so I'm going to add some foam tape to the back of him where he needs it. And then there was a little bit that I needed to remove because he was going to sit on top of that purple flower a bit. And it ended up being the perfect size to just add underneath his wing so that could be supported. So I just popped that underneath there. So all that's left is to add a little bit of glitter to this card. So I'm going to grab my favorite Stardust Stickles and of course add that to the bee's wings. They've got to have some glittery wings. So I'm just going to fill those in completely, just coloring carefully around the antenna on that guy. And then I'll also add the glitter to the honey in the honey jar. And that is going to finish up this card, so I will lift it up so you can see all of the detail. and hopefully catch some of that shimmer and shine and give you another peek at the inside as well. If you enjoyed this one, please be sure to hit that like button and leave me a comment down below. I'd love to hear from you guys. If you enjoy these Plan a Card With Me videos, remember that I do have an entire playlist on my channel that you can check out with all of the previous videos that I've done so far. If you're interested in picking up any of these products for yourself, I'll have everything linked in the description bar below. And if you'd like to keep watching, here are 2 extra videos I thought you might also enjoy. You can click on either one to check them out. Thank you so much for spending your time with me today. I hope you had a good one, and I will see you guys soon in another video. Bye-bye.